That morning, the air smelled like scorched leaves, dry, brittle, sharp, though it was mid-July, and nothing should have smelled like fire. Eleanor Hayes stood barefoot in her kitchen, holding a chipped ceramic mug she never used, except on days when she missed her brother. She didn't plan to cry, not on that morning. Not after all these years. But grief has a way of sharpening around anniversaries. And July 14th marked 20 years since the fire, since everything their house, their mother, and Daniel had vanished into ash and silence. She stirred her coffee slower than usual, watching the cream curl into spirals like smoke. It had been so long. Long enough that most people stopped asking. Long enough that people who once searched for him had moved away, died, or convinced themselves he never existed at all. But Eleanor never stopped looking. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. She didn't keep his things in boxes or light candles on birthdays. Instead, she listened for him in static, in wind, in dreams, where he was just out of reach, standing in doorways, waving from train windows, vanishing into crowds. And then that morning, as she scrolled through her email with bleary eyes and no expectations, she saw it. A message with no subject line, no sender name, just a single attachment. She opened it, and her heart collapsed inward like a building set on fire. It was a photo. Grainy, faded, cropped, but unmistakable. A boy, maybe mid-30s, now seated at a grimy bus stop in Arizona. Same cheekbone scar from falling off their old backyard swing. Same eyes wide, uncertain, like he was always listening for something. She stared at the image. And then, before she could blink or cry or breathe, her phone buzzed once, then went black. Battery dead. Or maybe something else. Eleanor stood there motionless, the light from the window cutting across her face like a diagonal scar. The silence around her wasn't peaceful. It was too still, too thick. Like the house itself had taken a breath and was waiting to see what she would do. She stared at the dark screen of her phone. The email, the photo, it couldn't be a dream. She felt the pulse in her neck hammering. Every part of her screamed to move, to act, to do something. But her body wouldn't follow. She knew better than to believe in miracles. She'd buried that part of herself a long time ago, buried it next to the memory of Daniel where it wouldn't haunt her every step. But the photo didn't care what she believed. It existed. It was real. And it was him. The last time she saw her brother, he was 12. Barefoot, laughing face smeared with soot and marshmallow from the night before. He had a habit of wandering outside before breakfast just to listen to the birds, he said. And he was always careful. Always back before their mother had the chance to worry. But that morning, he never came back. The fire tore through their house like it had been waiting. Like it knew they were asleep. No warning, no escape. Smoke had filled the hallways before the first crack of burning timber split the silence. Their mother got Eleanor out first, dragged her through the back window arms, bleeding, coughing up black smoke. Then she turned to go back for Daniel. But she never returned. Firemen said the back room collapsed. Said nobody could have survived. Said the bodies, what they found, matched the timeline. But the problem was, they never found Daniel. Not a trace, no remains, no shoe, nothing, just absence. They told Eleanor it was grief playing tricks, that she needed to believe her brother was still out there because it hurt less than facing the truth. But Eleanor didn't feel peace when she imagined him gone. She felt wrong, out of sync. Like part of her spine had been removed, and she was walking lopsided through time. So when she looked at the photo on her now dead phone, that sense of misalignment, the unbearable ache, suddenly stilled. Just for a moment. Because somewhere, somehow, her brother had survived, and someone wanted her to know. But who and why now? He plugged the phone into the wall and waited. It didn't turn on. No lights, no hum, nothing. Her hands began to tremble. She tried her laptop next, praying the email would still be open. But when the screen blinked on, the message was gone. The inbox was empty. Not even in spam, not even in deleted. Every folder wiped clean. Only one tab remained open. A Google search, something she hadn't typed. Bus station, Maricopa County, AZ incident, July 12th. She didn't remember opening that. She hadn't even heard of Maricopa County before. But something inside her stomach twisted at the sight of it. It was the day before the date stamped in the corner of the photo. And that search, that was his location. Whoever sent the image wanted her to go. Eleanor didn't pack. She didn't change clothes. She left her half-empty mug on the counter, grabbed her keys and drove. She didn't even think of work or friends or her landlord's voicemail from last week. The only sound in her mind was the echo of her brother's voice, soft, quiet, the way he used to whisper when he was afraid to wake their mother, Ellie. You don't have to be scared. I'll be right here. She had driven 12 hours before she noticed she hadn't blinked in what felt like an hour. The desert air thickened the deeper she went into Arizona dry heat that clung to her skin, shimmering roads that blurred her vision. Cacti stood like sentinels in the distance. The horizon bled with dying gold and amber. She reached the station just after midnight. The building was half abandoned. No buses, no people. Just the sound of a buzzing light bulb that flickered like it was choking. The bench from the photo was still there, same rusted legs, same cracked concrete beneath. She approached it slowly. Nothing. No one. Then she saw it wedged beneath the bench. A folded sheet of yellowed paper weighted down with a stone. Her heart pounded as she knelt and pulled it free. There were only 5 words on it, scrawled in the handwriting she hadn't seen in 20 years. You need to find the cabin. Her breath caught. That word cabin, it dragged her backward in time faster than her mind could resist. She and Daniel used to play in a rundown shack deep in the woods behind their childhood home in Oregon. It had been their secret place, hidden in a thicket of pine miles from any marked trail. Their mother forbade them from going too far, especially after the storm one summer flooded the creek and washed part of the trail away. But Daniel always insisted, said the cabin was safe, said it belonged to them. They'd carved their names into one of the floorboards, hers on the left, his on the right. The last time they went there together, Daniel had brought a Polaroid camera stolen from their mom's closet. He said they should leave a picture of themselves inside so the cabin remembers us. She never saw that picture again. Until now. Because taped to the back of the note was a second photo. This one wasn't of Daniel at a bus stop. This one was old, dusty, faded. It was them children, 11 and 12. Sitting side by side on a wooden floor with moonlight bleeding through cracks in the wall. Eleanor gasped, because behind them, just barely visible in the background, was a figure, tall, shadowed, no face, and a flame licking the edge of the wall. The photo shook in her hands, trembling like a thing alive. She stared at it under the yellow buzz of the flickering light, willing the image to stay still. But her mind wouldn't. That figure, tall, formless, faceless. It hadn't been there, not when the photo was taken. She would have remembered, wouldn't she? The memory of that day was fractured. A blur of pine needles, afternoon sun, and Daniel trying to get the old camera to work. He'd made her laugh, said the cabin was magic, that it hid things, protected them from being seen by the world. She thought it was just a game, but now she wasn't sure if anything had ever been a game at all. She turned the note over again. "You need to find the cabin." The handwriting was his. No question. But who left it? Was Daniel here? Had she just missed him? Was he watching her now? She stood back, straightening, and scanned the parking lot, empty, desolate. There were no footprints in the dirt. No sound but the wind and the whine of that single dying bulb. Still something prickled along her spine. That old feeling. Like being watched from the woods. Like something breathing just behind the trees. She got back in her car and locked the doors. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something colder, more rational, like a puzzle snapping together in her mind. He was alive, but he was running. From someone or something. And whatever trail he'd left, it started with that cabin. Eleanor hadn't stepped foot in Oregon in nearly a decade. After the fire, she was passed between relatives like a ghost in the attic. People spoke of Daniel in hushed voices. Said he must be gone, said it was better to let her move on. No one ever said the word missing out loud. No one ever said maybe. So she said it for them, quietly to herself every night, like a vow. Maybe he's still alive. Maybe I'll find him. Maybe he'll come home. Now, for the first time, she had something solid. A direction. She drove through the night chasing broken memories and highway signs. Each mile deeper into Oregon felt heavier, like gravity thickened with every county line she passed. The trees grew taller. The air grew cooler. And somewhere in that wilderness, the cabin waited. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. By sunrise, she was in Grey Ridge, the town closest to their old home. But the house was gone, replaced by a newer structure, all polished stone and glass. The yard was bare. The old oak tree where Daniel carved their initials had been cut down. She stood at the edge of the property, hands in her pockets, watching a family she didn't recognize eat breakfast through a window. A dog barked somewhere inside. Kids laughed. It didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like a stranger wearing the skin of her past. But the woods behind the house, the forest they were told never to go too far into, that was still there. Unchanged, dark, waiting. She parked on the roadside and walked toward the tree line. Her boots crunched over brittle pine needles and broken branches. The deeper she walked, the more the sounds of town vanished. Wind pressed through the canopy like a whisper. She passed the dried creek bed where Daniel once caught a salamander and named it Lord Lightning. The path, barely visible after all these years, still tugged at her body like a current. Like her muscles remembered what her brain had forgotten. Then she saw it. The cabin, or what was left of it. Half-collapsed vines crawling through its roof boards, gray with age and rot. The door hung off its hinges, but it was real. Still here, just like in the photo. She stepped inside. The air was damp and still. It smelled of mildew, wet earth, and something faint like scorched wood. Her footfalls stirred clouds of dust that danced in the beams of light, cutting through the gaps in the roof. And there in the corner was the floorboard, the one they carved. She knelt, ran her fingers along the scratched initials. E-H and D-H. The letters were still there, weathered but intact. Her eyes stung. She sat back on her heels, breath shaking. Then she saw something tucked between two wall planks, almost hidden behind a knot of tangled ivy. A journal. She pulled it free carefully, as if it might crumble in her hands. The cover was water-damaged leather. No name, no date, just dirt age and memory. She opened it. Inside were sketches, pages and pages of them. Rough pencil lines, sometimes torn, sometimes smeared. But one thing was clear, they were drawn by Daniel. She remembered his style, the way he always exaggerated eyes, how his shading leaned too dark, too heavy, as if every figure was being swallowed by shadow. And the subjects. They weren't normal. Figures standing in the woods, black eyes, bent limbs, no mouths, no faces. Some with fire where their heads should be, others with symbols carved into their arms. One page made her flinch, a drawing of the cabin, this exact view as if sketched from where she sat now. But in the doorway stood him, Daniel, older, eyes wide, mouth open like he was screaming. Above his head, written in bold, shaky ink, "It follows light. It hides in flame." Eleanor froze. Her blood turned to ice. Something rustled outside, sharp, fast. She stood and backed away from the doorway, eyes darting. The forest was silent again, too silent. Her hand tightened around the journal. And then something new. A flash of white on the cabin wall. A piece of paper. Fresh, not aged like the others. She hadn't seen it before. She approached slowly. The page was pinned to the wood with a nail rusted bent sideways. Written in the same frantic handwriting, "Stop looking." And below that, in smaller letters, "If you find me, it'll find you too." She didn't move at first. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. The paper flapped slightly as a breeze pressed through the cracked wood, the only sound in that tomb of silence. "Stop looking," it said, like a whisper from someone standing just behind her shoulder. But Eleanor didn't turn around. She couldn't turn around because something told her. If she did, she wouldn't be alone. She stepped back slow, careful. The journal pressed tight against her chest. Her mind raced not just with fear, but with a feeling she couldn't shake. A pressure, a presence. Not the memory of her brother, not grief, something else. Like a set of eyes that didn't belong in this world were watching her from the cracks in the trees. She made it to the edge of the woods, just as the sun dipped low behind the ridgeline. Her car sat untouched, a lonely dot in a field of dying light. When she reached the driver's side, she stopped cold. There was something on the windshield. Another photo. It wasn't old like the one from their childhood. It wasn't grainy or sun-faded like the one from the bus stop. This one was recent, sharp, clear. It was of her, from behind, walking into the woods, taken just minutes ago. Her breath caught in her throat, the angle it had to have been shot from just behind the tree line, and she hadn't heard a thing. No footsteps, no shudder, no breath. That meant whoever took it was still nearby, or had never left. She scanned the trees, but saw only the shifting shadows of branches in the breeze. Still, she could feel it again. The presence, watching, measuring. She got in the car, slammed the lock, and started the engine. Tires spun in gravel. The journal sat on the passenger seat, like a relic pulled from a grave. As she drove, she glanced in the mirror every few seconds. And at one point, she swore. She saw movement behind her, a pale shape ducking into the trees. No detail, just motion, wrong and fast and wrong. She didn't stop driving until she was 3 towns away. Eleanor checked into a motel just outside a gas station that hadn't updated its signage since the 90s. She walked into the room like a soldier crossing into hostile ground. Lights on, curtains closed. Every door checked twice. Lock clicked 3 times. Only then did she open the journal again. The deeper she flipped the stranger, the entries became. The sketches grew erratic, the handwriting more desperate. There were pages she couldn't read, either water-damaged or deliberately scratched out. But certain phrases repeated, "It comes when you remember. Don't speak its name. Flame keeps it out, but not for long." She found a drawing of their childhood home before the fire. There were tall shadows around it, longer than any trees. Daniel had circled the attic window, scrawled, "Look next to it." Then another sketch, someone curled in the fetal position. It hides in the quiet, he'd written. And then a final drawing that made her blood run cold. It was her. Older as she was now. Sitting on a motel bed, journal in her lap, window behind her. And in the window, a figure. No face, no eyes. Just a vague human shape almost charcoaled out, smudged as though the pensi. The caption beneath it written in a jagged, slanted hand. If you read this, it knows your name now. She slammed the journal shut, heart hammering. She turned to look behind her toward the window. Nothing. But the air in the room had changed subtly but undeniably. Thicker, charged, like the second before a lightning strike, like static whispering in your teeth. She stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. Just her reflection. Just the night. She stared for a long moment, then told herself out loud that she was safe. That it was just a drawing, just paranoia, just trauma manifesting in pencil. But part of her didn't believe it, and as she turned back to the bed, her phone buzzed. No number, just a blank contact. She answered. There was no voice, only breathing. Low, steady. And then a whisper. You shouldn't have looked. The call ended. Eleanor dropped the phone. Her limbs felt like water. Her mind reeled. But underneath the fear, something else began to rise. Something colder, sharper, resolve. She had spent 20 years in grief, in doubt, in half-truths and unanswered questions. Now she had a trail, a direction, a truth, no matter how dark, how twisted, how impossible it felt. She picked up the journal again, flipped to the back cover. A folded page had been hidden there, tucked into the lining. It was a map, rough, hand-sketched, but clear. A route through the woods past the cabin, further than they'd ever dared to go. An X marked in red. Next to it, where I went, where it waits. And below, almost faded, don't come alone. But Eleanor was already alone. She had always been. And she was going back, not just to find her brother, but to uncover what had been buried with the fire. And maybe to burn it out once and for all. The motel door clicked shut behind her, like the ceiling of a vault. Outside, the world was still dark. The moon hung swollen and silent above the mountains, pale against the void. She didn't wait for dawn. She couldn't. Every second that passed felt like a tide rising around her ankles, pulling her back towards something she didn't understand, but knew was waiting. She drove with the headlights off for the first half-mile, as if not drawing attention might help, as if what she feared could be outsmarted by shadows. But darkness has teeth when it learns your scent. The trees thickened again. She parked where the road ended and started walking. The journal was in her coat, the map folded in her pocket. The trail beyond the cabin was barely visible, overgrown, gnarled like the earth had tried to swallow it. But Eleanor followed it by instinct, like something inside her had walked this path before, like it was embedded in the marrow of her bones. Pine needles crunched underfoot. Owls called distantly, then fell abruptly silent. Each step deeper felt like walking into a memory that wasn't hers. Or maybe it was, but had been stolen, buried. After an hour, the air began to change. Cooler, denser. The trees curved inward unnaturally, like they were listening. And then she saw it. A clearing, rough and circular, too perfect to be natural. And in the center, a structure, not quite a house, not a cabin, something else. Wooden walls patched with rusted metal, a roof made of mismatched shingles, windows too small and too high. It looked like something built from memory alone, half finished, half forgotten. She stepped forward. Every part of her body screamed no. But something else inside her whispered yes, louder, stronger. like her brother's voice had returned and was calling from inside. She reached the doorway and hesitated. The journal map had a red X over this place, but offered no name, no warning beyond what she already felt in her bones. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. The smell hit first. Damp rotten, not just of wood or mold, but of old life. Like wet photographs and abandoned breath. She stepped inside. There were symbols on the floor scratched into the wood not drawn. Circles, eyes, flame shapes, some overlapping. The deeper she looked, the less sense they made. Some of them seemed to shift if she stared too long. On the far wall, tacked across an entire wooden beam, were photographs. Hundreds of them. Torn from books, taped from magazines, some printed on old thermal paper. Faces of people, men, women, children, all with the same hollow eyes. All gone. And in the center, Daniel. Not a photo of him. Daniel himself. Or what was left of him. He stood against the far wall. Still. Gaunt. Eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in decades. His hair was long tangled. His face, older than he should have been. Not just in years, but in weight. In suffering. He looked at her. And didn't speak. She froze, hands trembling, heart thrashing in her chest. For a moment the world narrowed to just his eyes. So familiar. So him. And yet something wasn't right. She whispered his name. Daniel. His mouth moved. Not words. Just motion. Like he was trying to speak through water. Then finally, you shouldn't be here. Her voice cracked. You're alive, Daniel. I thought, what happened? Why didn't you? He stepped forward suddenly. Fast, not aggressive, but desperate. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was cold. I tried to stop it, he said, voice shaking. But it found me. I didn't leave. I was taken. Eleanor stared at him. Taken by who? He looked toward the corner of the room. Not a name. Not a person. But a presence. And he said so soft she barely heard it, wears fire like a mask. Suddenly a sound behind them, a low creak, the door closing. But there was no wind. Daniel pulled her to the ground. Fast, silent. His eyes wide with terror. Don't speak. Don't look. It knows your voice now. It knows your eyes. The room darkened. Not from outside light, but as if the walls themselves were absorbing it. Eleanor tried to breathe. Her lungs refused. And then, a shadow moved through the far wall. Not walked. Not stepped. Moved. Like smoke crawling against wood. Its outline was almost human. Tall. Elongated limbs. But where its face should be was a flicker of light. Like flame frozen in place. Constantly burning but casting no heat. Daniel gripped her tighter. It feeds on what's forgotten. That's how it found me. I remembered too much. And now you? The figure stopped. Tilted its head. As if it was listening. Then it whispered in a voice like cracking embers, you brought her here. Eleanor couldn't scream. She couldn't move. The voice wasn't just in the air, it was in her head, in her blood. Daniel lunged forward. Run! He threw something salt ash she couldn't tell toward the creature. It hissed, shrieked. She bolted. Out the door, into the trees. The air burned in her throat. Behind her, a roar. Not fire, not wind. Something older. She ran. Branches cut her skin. Her legs bled. Her vision blurred. But she didn't stop until she collapsed beside her car, gasping, sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. She looked back. The woods were silent again. No shadow, no fire, no Daniel. Just darkness. And a single item in her coat pocket that hadn't been there before. Another photo of Daniel. But this time, he was burning and smiling. The photos shook in her hand, edges curling with heat, even though the air around her was ice cold. Daniel was smiling in it, but not the way he used to. Not with joy. not with mischief. This smile was too wide, too still, and the flames around him didn't look like they were hurting him. They looked like they belonged to him. She dropped the photo on the passenger seat like it might bite. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Blood from a scratch above her eye was trailing down her cheek. She could still hear the voice in her bones like embers whispering through her bloodstream. You brought her here. Not who are you. Not why are you here. Just blame. Like the thing already knew. She turned the key and peeled away from the trailhead tires, skidding in gravel trees, rushing past the windshield like they were chasing her. The sky above the forest was still pitch black, though her dashboard said it was nearly 7 a.m. Should have been light by now. The next town over was a single gas station, 2 boarded storefronts, and a diner called Edith's. She parked in the back lot, slipped inside, and sat in the farthest booth she could find. The place was empty, except for a man asleep at the counter and a waitress with cigarette burns along her forearms who brought her coffee without speaking. Eleanor stared out the window. The sun was trying to rise. The light was there somewhere. But it felt blocked, like it didn't want to touch this place. She took out the journal again, and this time she noticed something new. In the back pages, buried in a taped-down fold, was a photo she had missed. It had been deliberately hidden, sealed between pages with brittle yellowing glue. She peeled it open and gasped. It wasn't Daniel. It was a different boy. 12, maybe 13. Same wide eyes, same sunburned cheeks. But a different face. In the background, the same cabin. And behind that boy, the same flickering flame-faced figure Eleanor had seen with her own eyes. The date stamped on the photo was October 1983, 12 years before the fire that took their home, 12 years before Daniel vanished. She flipped the journal again, back to the pages of drawings, the frantic scrawlings, the repeated phrases. It comes when you remember. It hides in the quiet. Don't speak its name. And then written in what seemed to be someone else's handwriting, neater, slower. Not the first, never the last. She left the diner before the coffee cooled. There was something older than Daniel at play, something deeper, something that used him. And if the thing had appeared to another child in 1983, how far did this go? She needed records, archives, names. Someone had to know. She drove straight to Grey Ridge County Records. The building was gray stone, moss-stained, tucked in the shadow of the ridge where fog hung like regret. Inside, an old woman behind the desk looked up with suspicion. But when Eleanor said, "I'm looking into missing persons specifically around Marrow Creek," the woman's face changed. Not in confusion, in recognition. The woman didn't ask questions, didn't push back. She simply stood and walked down a hallway and returned with a single box marked "Closed, 1983-1995. Eleanor opened it slowly. The paper inside smelled like old smoke and mold. Inside were files. Dozens. Each one tagged with a name, a photo, a date of disappearance. All within 50 miles of the Marrow Creek woods. All children, ages 9 to 14. And every file had been labeled with the same red ink stamp, no remains. No cause. Case closed. She flipped through, stomach twisting. Then she froze. A name she recognized. Judith Albright, her 6th grade science teacher. She had disappeared the summer after Daniel did. Everyone said she had moved to California. But her file was in the box, with a photo of her car found at the edge of the same woods Eleanor had just fled. No note, no leads. Just a drawing found in her desk of the same burning-faced figure Daniel had sketched in the journal. Eleanor sat back in the chair, her heart hammering. The pattern wasn't a coincidence. This was a cycle. Something in those woods hunted children, and then those who remembered them. It didn't kill right away. It waited. Years, sometimes decades. Until something was triggered. A memory, a search, a photograph. Then it returned and pulled the next person into its orbit. The fire hadn't just been destruction. It had been containment. But the fire failed. Daniel survived. And whatever followed him still burned. She took photos of the files with her phone and left quickly, sensing she had already drawn too much attention. Back in her car, she called the only person she hadn't spoken to in 15 years, her Aunt Rachel, who had raised her after the fire. The woman who always told her, "Some things are better left buried, Ellie." The phone rang, once, twice. Then, "Ellie, Aunt Rachel," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you know Daniel might still be alive?" Silence. Then a breath. "I was afraid this day would come." "What are you talking about?" "You should come here," Rachel said. "I have something I've never shown you." "What is it?" "It's what he left behind before the fire." He knew. He knew it was coming. Eleanor felt the dread coil tight in her gut. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I saw it too," Rachel said. "Once. When I was a girl. And I never wanted to see it again." The drive to Aunt Rachel's house felt longer than she remembered. The road curled through misted hills and fog-blanketed pine groves, every mile drawing her further from the world she knew and closer to something unspoken. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every bend. There was no music, no talking, just the low hum of tires on asphalt, and a growing sense that her childhood hadn't ended in the fire, it had begun there. Rachel lived in a weathered farmhouse at the edge of Silas Valley, a place that even the internet seemed to forget. No streetlights, no neighbors. Just a dirt driveway, half swallowed by weeds, and a porch light that flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. The moment Eleanor stepped out of the car, she knew her aunt had been waiting. Rachel opened the door before Eleanor knocked. She looked older, smaller. Her eyes had sunk behind years of silence. But when they locked eyes, Eleanor saw it. A knowing, a fear long buried. "I hoped I'd never see you here," Rachel said softly. "But I kept everything, just in case." Inside, the house smelled like cedar and old paper. The living room was dim curtains, drawn lamps glowing amber against the wood-paneled walls. Nothing had changed in 20 years. Not the floral couch. Not the photo of Daniel and Eleanor on the fireplace mantel taken the summer before the fire. "He looks like Dad in that photo," Eleanor said quietly. Rachel nodded, then walked past her. "Come with me." She led Eleanor down a narrow hallway and opened a door that hadn't been touched in years. The attic. Dust hit her lungs like fog as they stepped inside. Boxes lined the walls unlabeled. A stack of yellowed newspapers sat beside a trunk that looked hand-carved. Rachel knelt and undid the latch. Inside were photos, journals, scraps of fabric, melted candles, and something else, a mask, made of blackened wood and scorched pine resin. Its face was featureless, except for a single jagged mouth carved into it, wide and smiling. Eleanor stepped back. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. Rachel didn't answer at first. Then she pulled something else from the box, a notebook brittle and frayed at the corners. "This was your grandmother's," she said, "and her grandmother's before that. This has been in our family a long time, Ellie. It's part of something older than any of us." She opened the notebook. Inside were drawings, crude sketches of the flame-faced figure. Page after page, different forms, sometimes surrounded by children, sometimes towering above cabins, sometimes weeping ash. Wait, this is the thing I saw, Eleanor said, heart pounding. In the woods. In the cabin with Daniel. Rachel looked at her with something between sorrow and fear. It's not a thing, Ellie. It's not a ghost or a demon. It's a memory. Eleanor frowned. What are you talking about? Rachel turned another page. The writing was scrawled in ink, so faded it was barely legible. The burning one comes when the bloodline forgets. It is not summoned. It is remembered. It doesn't feed like you'd think, Rachel whispered. It doesn't want bodies. It wants memory, pain, history. Our family was supposed to pass the story down to keep it alive through ritual so it wouldn't return. But someone stopped it, Eleanor asked. Rachel nodded. Your mother. She thought it was just old superstition. She broke the line. She refused the rite. She burned the altar. And then the fire came, Eleanor whispered. Rachel's eyes watered, and it took Daniel. But Eleanor shook her head. No, he's alive. I saw him. I spoke to him. Rachel closed her eyes. Then it's already too late. He was never meant to survive the fire. It was supposed to end with him, a sacrifice, a seal. You knew. Eleanor's voice cracked. I hoped he didn't make it, Rachel said, voice trembling. Because if he survived, the burning one wouldn't stop. It would grow stronger, more present. It feeds on survivors. Eleanor backed away. You let me believe he died, she whispered. All these years. I was protecting you. No, you were protecting yourself. Eleanor grabbed the journal and the mask and stormed out of the attic. Rachel didn't follow. The trees outside had darkened again. The wind had died. No birds, no insects. Just stillness. She sat in her car, shaking, staring at the mask beside her. The smile carved into it looked different now. Not cruel, not evil. Sad. Like something once human. Forgotten. Misremembered. A thought emerged, unwanted and sharp. What if Daniel wasn't trying to escape it? What if he was becoming it? She drove again. No direction. No plan. Just movement. As if staying still would let it catch her. Night fell too quickly. Her phone had no signal, no GPS. She didn't even know what town she was in anymore when the road ended at an abandoned gas station, one she swore she'd passed before. And on the front window, a message scrawled in soot. You're remembering too much. She stared at the soot-written words for what felt like hours. You're remembering too much. It wasn't a warning. It was a sentence. The kind handed down by something ancient and cruel, not out of anger, but necessity. She stepped out of the car. The air outside was motionless. Even the leaves on the cracked pavement didn't stir. The gas station was dead, abandoned for decades by the look of it. Windows smashed, signs rusted. A payphone hung off the hook, its receiver swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. She approached the door. Inside, the walls were covered in photos. Not Polaroids, not news clippings. Sketches. Charcoal. Pencil. Ink. Some faded, some fresh. Each one showed a version of the burning one. Some drawn like saints in stained glass. Others like shadows stretching over hills. One almost childlike, a matchstick figure with a fire, where its head should be surrounded by tiny houses with smoke pouring from them. And in the center of the far wall, pinned with rusted nails, a drawing of Eleanor, standing in a forest, arms raised, eyes empty. She turned away, heart hammering. On the floor lay something small, half buried in dust and ash. A cassette tape, unlabeled. She picked it up with shaking hands. It was warm. She didn't have a player. But suddenly she knew where one was. Back in her car. The old stereo system had a cassette slot, something she'd never used, never even noticed. She climbed inside and slid the tape in. It clicked. and the voice that poured from the speakers was Daniel's. He sounded older, tired, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. "Ellie, if you're hearing this, you've already gone too far. You need to listen. Please." There was a long pause. Then his breath, soft, controlled. "You remember the cabin, the woods, the swing, the day I disappeared. But you don't remember the night before." Static crackled, because something took it from you. From both of us. I thought the fire was the end, but it was only the beginning. The burning one didn't just survive. It grew. And it used me. Fed on what I carried. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Daniel's voice was shaking now. They said remembering would bring it back. But that's not true. It never left. It's waiting. Inside us. A louder hiss of static. Then his voice again broken almost a whisper. "I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough to keep it away. It's using me now. To call you. To bring you here." Another pause. Then, don't trust the memory, Ellie. Don't trust what you think is real. Because some of it, maybe most of it, was given to you. She sat there frozen, hand hovering near the eject button, like touching it might erase the voice she'd waited her entire life to hear. The cassette ejected on its own. She stared at it, then at her hands. And for the first time, something was wrong. Her left hand. There was a scar there, an old one. Jagged, diagonal across her palm. But she didn't remember it. Not getting it, not bandaging it, not bleeding. But it was there. She ran her fingers over it, and then like a floodgate opening, the memory hit. A field of flames, a circle carved in soil. Daniel screaming, her own voice chanting something she didn't understand. A blade in her hand. The scar was the price, and the fire was hers. Not something that happened to them, something she did. Eleanor screamed. Her mind rejected it, tried to shove it away. But the images wouldn't stop now. The night before the fire. Their mother kneeling before a stone altar in the forest. Rachel behind her holding the mask. Daniel crying, screaming, held in place by roots that had twisted up from the earth itself. It hadn't been about saving him. It had been a ritual. Something inside her had known. Something older than language, deeper than blood. And when their mother refused to finish it, when she broke the circle, when she screamed, "This ends with me," Eleanor had lit the match. The fire hadn't been punishment. It had been rebellion. And Daniel had escaped it. That was the problem. She gripped the steering wheel like it might anchor her to the present, but nothing felt real anymore. Not the dashboard, not the air, not even her name. The radio turned on by itself. A voice, Daniel's voice, but not Daniel. Distorted, warped, you remembered. Static flooded the car. "Now you're mine again." She screamed and ripped the keys from the ignition. The car went dead. Silence. But she could still feel it. Inside her. Not a presence. A return. She wasn't just part of this. She was central to it. Not a witness, not a victim, but the vessel. And Daniel. Daniel had been trying not to escape the burning one. He'd been trying to keep it away from her. The forest felt different this time. The trees weren't just still, they were watching. She didn't remember turning the car around. Didn't remember driving. Only that she was walking now deeper and deeper into the woods behind the old cabin site. Her boots sank into the moss-heavy ground like she was moving through memory itself. The air was thick. Breathing felt like swallowing warm smoke. The journal was still in her coat pocket. The mask, too. And the tape, she didn't know why, but she kept it clutched in her hand like it might burn through her skin if she let go. Above her, The sky was wrong. No stars, no clouds. Just a dull amber hue like a sun that never rose or set. Every step she took, she felt younger, not in body, but in mind. The woods began to whisper, words in a tongue she didn't know but still understood. And then she saw it, the clearing. It was exactly as she remembered in the visions. A circle of blackened stones, charred earth. In the center, a single jagged stump. And on it, the same ritual knife. Unrusted, waiting. Eleanor dropped to her knees. The memories came fast now. The ritual, the blood, the fire. Her mother screaming, fighting to end the tradition. Rachel begging her not to resist. Daniel's cries echoing through the trees. But the thing that lived between all of them. The Burning One wasn't a monster that stalked the woods. It was a pact, a transference, not of body but of pain. It took the trauma passed down from mother to mother again and fed on it. Its only power came from repetition, and someone always had to carry the flame. That someone had been Eleanor. She rose slowly. The mask in her hand felt heavier now. She looked at it. The smile was gone. The mouth now curled into something else. Regret. From behind her, the wind shifted, and she heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate. She turned. Daniel stood at the tree line. Not a vision, not a dream. Him, older, eyes sunken, clothes torn and stained with time. But him. Ellie, he said. And she broke. She ran into his arms, and for a long moment the woods were silent. Nothing but the sound of two broken hearts reuniting in the middle of a nightmare they never chose. But he pulled away first. I didn't want you to find me, he whispered. You weren't supposed to remember. Tears streamed down her face. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd come back. And if you came back, he looked toward the stump, you'd have to finish what you started. She stepped back. No, I'm not that girl anymore. But Daniel's eyes filled with a terrible sorrow. You don't understand. You never stopped being her. The fire didn't just change me, it marked you. That's why it's been waiting. She shook her head. Then let's burn it down. Together. End it, we can't, he said. Because if we do, it takes something else. She frowned. What do you mean? Daniel looked down. Last time it took our mother. The time before that, it took Grandma, but now... He looked into her eyes. It has to take me. No, she said, voice breaking. No, there has to be another way. But deep down she knew. The Burning One wasn't just a ghost or a god. It was a curse. A living memory. And the only way to kill a memory was to bury it alive. Daniel stepped toward the stump. You still have the knife, he said softly. No, she said. Please. His voice shook. If you don't finish it, it spreads. It finds others. The family bloodline, children, strangers. Anyone who carries pain, strong enough to burn. It's already whispering, Ellie. You hear it. She collapsed to her knees. The tape in her hand fell to the dirt. Daniel picked it up, stared at it. You've always been the strong one, he whispered, even when you didn't know it. He reached into her coat and pulled out the mask, held it to his face, and the moment he did, the trees around them breathed. A groan low and mournful like wind through bones. The fire inside the stump reignited. The stones pulsed. It was time. Eleanor rose. Tears fell freely now. She gripped the knife. Daniel nodded. I'm not afraid. But I am, she whispered. I know. He stepped into the circle. She followed, and with trembling hands, she raised the blade not to strike him, not to kill. The ritual wasn't death. It was release. and as the knife sliced across the palm of her hand once more, her blood dripped onto the stump. Daniel did the same. Their blood mingled, and the fire roared upward. But this time, it didn't consume. It cleansed. It washed over them like a scream turned into light. And for a moment, just a moment, Eleanor saw it all. Every generation before her, every daughter, every mother, every child who carried the flame. Their sorrow, their sacrifice, their silence. And she spoke the words not in English, not in prayer, but in remembering. I release what you gave me. The fire flickered. I carry no more. And with that the flame went out. She woke up alone. The clearing was still, the stones gone, the stump dust. Daniel, nowhere, but in the place where he'd stood a photograph. Old, burned at the edges. It showed a boy and a girl standing by a lake, smiling. Eleanor rose. The scar on her hand was gone, and so was the mask. So was the weight. Not everything had returned, not everyone. But she had. Eleanor rose. The scar on her hand was gone, and so was the mask. So was the weight. Not everything had returned, not everyone. But she had. And that was enough. Some nights she still dreams of the fire. But now it's silent. No screams. No smoke. Just embers floating like fireflies across a field that never ends. She wakes up with the taste of ash in her mouth and the sound of her brother's laugh in the space just behind her ears, like it's tucked into the folds of her memory too deep to reach, but never truly gone. The photo sits on her desk now, framed. Not because it proves anything, but because it's the only thing that doesn't change. Everything else does. The house feels smaller, the world stranger. The woods that once felt like home now feel like they're keeping a secret they're not ready to give up. And maybe they never will. People ask her why she came back, why she left the job, the city, the life. She never gives a real answer, just smiles and says, there are stories worth finishing. Because what else can you say when the truth sounds like madness, that your bloodline carried a fire fed by sorrow, that your childhood was the kindling, that your brother, your best friend, was never lost in the woods, but left there by something older than cruelty, that the only way to save him was to forget he ever existed. Some days she drives, no destination, no plan, just the hum of tires over empty roads and the rhythm of her own heart, steady now, but changed. She watches the trees blur past and wonders how many other stories are buried beneath roots and moss and time. How many others are out there like her, carrying something they can't name, drawn to places they've never been, but somehow remember. And she hopes. God, she hopes. They find their own clearing, their own fire, their own silence. Because the truth is this, what's forgotten isn't alwa, and what's buried doesn't always stay in the ground. But sometimes, if you listen closely enough to the whispering of the trees, if you follow the thread back through the smoke, if you're brave enough to bleed again, you don't just remember what happened. You become who you were meant to be. And in that final aching moment, when the light fades and the world exhales and the silence settles over you like a soft, familiar shroud, you realize the story didn't end with the fire. It began with the photo and what it gave back.